There are all these small trades, and they'll go on forever, and I'll be doing them forever. But the big ones don't come around that often.
Okay.
And occasionally there's one that comes around once in a lifetime, I think. And this is it for me. Like, this is it. This is the biggest trade in my life. And it's the robot trade. It's, the fancy way to say robots or humanoids is embodied AI. It's the embodiment of artificial intelligence, right? And you probably heard Jensen at NVIDIA talk about it a lot the last 6 to 9 months. You hear Elon talking about it a lot. I've talked about it constantly, but I firmly believe that the embodiment of artificial intelligence is going to radically rebuild our world and change our economy unlike we've ever seen in our lifetime.
Start us out with why robots. Where did you first come up with the concept of robots are going to take over? This is going to be the next great wealth transfer, so to speak, that this is it.
It's just the biggest change to our life. And with that big of a change comes opportunity, right? 8 years ago, I was introduced to a couple kids that had came out of the UT robotics program in Austin, and they were making exoskeletons for the Defense Department and for NASA. And they were generating a ton of money, like $30 million of contract revenue, making basically Iron Man suits. I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen, and this would make for the dumbest investment of my life, so I'm not investing in you. And I said no. But I kept up with them over the years. And every time I go to South by Southwest, I meet with these kids. And I'm like, oh, they're really advancing their stuff. And then one day, they started making humanoid robots. And they pulled me aside. This is about 3 years ago. And they said, we are having a moment with humanoid robots, with actuator technology, which are the muscles of the bots, with sensor technology, and with whole body control, which is how the robot controls itself and walks and balances and articulates. And the founder of this company, Jeff Cardenas, said, Chris, within low single-digit years, I'm going to have a walking humanoid robot that is going to be able to function in a commercial and industrial setting and do physical labor at close to human speed. And I was like, that if you actually were to achieve that, it would be the biggest thing that was ever invented. He's like, I know, and it's going to happen. He's like, I guarantee you it's going to happen. Low single-digit years. And I was like, well, you're probably crazy, but just in case you're not, I'm going to write you a check. And I wrote him a check, a smallish check for me. And I kept up with them. And I was like, maybe I should research this stuff a little deeper. I started researching humanoid robots, the viability of them, the history of them, how real this was. And then Elon started talking about it. I was like, oh, Elon's talking about this now. I think this is kind of interesting. And then I got a call a year ago from a venture investor that I had kind of educated on robots. He's like, did you hear about this company in San Francisco who's raising like $700 million backed by Microsoft and OpenAI making humanoids called Figure AI? I was like, not really, but can you introduce me to the founder? And he did. And I ended up making a pretty large investment in that company. And then I also went back to Jeff and I said, Jeff, like, what's going on with your robot company? And I can't say anything too specific here tonight, but there's some big, big things happening with his company as well. And I ended up just started to like hang out with Jeff and like be like, how can I help? I want to be part of this. And and now I'm like 300 hours deep into humanoid robotics research. I converse with humanoid engineers around the world. I talk to other investors that are invested in either Figure or Aptronic or both. And we talk about this 7 days a week. Like, we're doing deep research. We're analyzing the technology. We're trying to assess how quickly it's going to be adopted by the world. Because we're investors in these companies, we have like insight that almost no one else in the world has from their CEOs that I can't speak about on this show because I'm under NDA from both companies. And all I can say is that what I have seen with my own eyes is unbelievably real, and this is happening. This is no longer like a 50% or 90% or 95%. It's like 100%. We are going to have humanoid robots that are going to be doing commercial physical labor that will be able to do any job on Earth before long. And we're going to have access to infinite labor in our world. Think about what it's like to have access to infinite physical labor. What would we build? What industries would evolve from that? How would that change our world? Imagine, there's 100 million people in the world who spend the bulk of their prime years when they should be getting married, having kids, having a joyous life. They spend those years taking care of a parent or grandparent. Not often in our world, but in most of the world, that's common. That's insane. It's actually insane. Could you imagine spending the bulk of your prime years just wiping the butt of your granddad? Well, that's a story that Jeff tells about his grandparents. And that's one of the inspirations of why he started Aptronic. And for 10 years has been trying to build this humanoid robot. And we have a few of these humanoid companies around the world, not many, a few that are truly real and commercial and scalable. That are going to be, I think, become some of the largest companies on earth. And right now they're very small, except for one, Tesla, right? And so Tesla is not small, but the funny thing about Tesla is all the exciting stuff happening at Tesla right now, hardly anyone's paying attention to the only thing that matters at Tesla, which is their humanoid division, their Optimus division. So I put out a tweet thread back in January of this year, almost a full year ago. And it was a 15-part tweet thread when no one was talking about humanoids. And it was how the Optimus division of Tesla by 2030 could be valued at $10 trillion based on them only producing 1.5 million robots at $100,000 a year lease rate, which is going to be the going rate for commercial robots. Yeah.
Lease.
So commercial robots will be leased to the world. So they won't be, you can't buy them. These are robots that you'll see in factories, the robots that you'll see in warehousing and logistics facilities all around the world. There's demand for tens and tens of millions of these robots. And it's not because these companies want to displace humans. None of them do. These companies simply want to grow. They simply do not have the physical labor they need to grow. So these robots will allow them to grow. Depending upon who you believe, we have somewhere between a 50 million and 350 million human labor shortage by 2030 for physical labor. So we need 50 to 350 million human physical laborers, and we're just not getting them. If you talk to these companies around the world, they cannot find young people to do these jobs that older people are doing, physical labor, laying foundation, to all this stuff. So the demand is through the roof. But forget about the demand.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine having infinite physical labor on Earth. What can we build? What can we do? Like, how would our lives change? Imagine every human, as you got older, you had someone to take care of you, right? To help you get up, get out of bed, get to the bathroom, someone to take your trash out. It would allow you to live a more productive, humane life in your older years. It would dramatically increase like the quality of life for almost every human on Earth.
This, to me, seems like it would drive down the cost eventually, just about everything. Like, let's say building a house is a good example. When you remove the labor component and you're able to employ these robots that work 24/7, perfect, without making any mistakes, the cost of these things should go down as companies' profit margins increase.
There's one problem with your thesis,
Yeah.
and there's a paradox, and I don't have the name of it off the top of my head, is related to coal. And the concept was the more coal that we were able to find back in the day when coal was the energy that everyone used, the cheaper coal would become, right? Because you'd have unreal amounts of coal, and it would get really cheap. Do you know what happened as we started to discover more coal?
We use more coal, right?
We use more coal. So maybe the things that you're thinking of today, the style of house that people like to live in globally would get cheaper, but what we will demand out of the world will go up. So the same way that we live in mini mansions now that never existed 25, 30 years ago, that's become common now. People expect that now. No one ever expected that now. We all grew up in like 1,500 square foot houses, right? So what we might expect, Graham, in like 20 or 30 years might look very different from what we expect today out of life. And so, yes, if we were to live exactly like this in 30 years, it could be super deflationary. But if our expectations on life climb that high, if we start to enter an age of abundance where everybody wants all this stuff, right? Whatever it is, everybody wants a humanoid. Nobody wants to cook anymore. No one wants to clean their house anymore. The humanoid does everything for you. Everybody wants this and that. It might radically change the economics of your thesis. So it's like we can't really visualize that.